What up? So I'm just doing this video because I want to make sure that we bring this conversation back to where it initially was. I've done my video, which you can check out already. And I mentioned what I'm about to mention here a little bit in it. And that video is about me basically talking about the move of the goalposts, and that's what we're seeing here. And when it comes to Sweden, which all eyes are on Sweden, right? It seems that, and it's odd, you got these articles that I've seen wrote up in. It's like people want Sweden to fail. They're anticipating. They've been talking about this for a month. Oh, they're gonna fail. They're gonna fail. And the reason why, for those that don't know, Sweden's one of the countries that didn't do the mass forms of like these economic lockdowns and shelter in places like the vast, I don't want to say the vast, like let's say a lot of the other countries, including the United States, where they had these sweeping forms of these lockdowns and shelter in places. Sweden went a different route. Now, they're not the only country that went a different route. Talked about Japan in some capacity. It's a little different. Even South Korea. They just kind of went different routes in terms of trying to contain this virus. So a lot of folks went the whole, okay, shut everything down and shut a lot of things down. Sweden, they do have restrictions, but just not nearly as many as some of these other countries. Now, what I'm seeing people, oddly enough, do is shift the post, and they're like, well, look at Sweden and look at, let's say, the surrounding countries like Norway. So Sweden, which is more populated, doesn't necessarily have the same population density and the comparable population density in itself. However, per million, it does. Sweden does have more deaths. Even looking here, looking here, you can see that Sweden's here and Norway is here. So it does have more deaths per million. However, you got to take into consideration as well, if you are going to just look at strictly lockdown versus and its effectiveness versus whether or not it's effective or not, there are all the countries with the mass lockdowns, or let's say the top countries with the top deaths per million, all have lockdowns. France, Belgium, Italy, UK. Nonetheless, that's not what the conversation should be about. The whole reason you look at this, the IHME or IMHE model, Washington State model, where all this talk has been about, quote unquote, flattening the curve. So if you are going to try to take anything from Sweden, the deaths period, or even and especially the number of people infected, is irrelevant, because that was never the conversation. The point of flattening the curve had everything to do with spreading the number of infected in terms of people that are going to utilize those hospital resources over time, so that you don't overwhelm the hospital resources. That's the whole point. It's funny these guys use this term and it seems like they are either changing the meaning or didn't know what it meant in the first place. It had nothing to do with limiting the amount of deaths from the virus or infections from the virus. It had nothing to do with that. It was about spreading it out over time and not having it happen at once so that you overwhelm the hospitals. That's what the point was. So the only thing that matters in this regards when it comes to Sweden that you should be analyzing is whether or not, considering they don't have those lockdowns like a lot of other countries have, including the surrounding ones, the only thing that matters is whether or not their hospitals are overwhelmed. And as it stands right now, they're not. They're holding up. Believe it or not, they're holding up. That's the only thing that's relevant. The infected rate was always going to be the infected rate, or more so, the infected were always going to be the infected. That's what the model assumed. Now, granted, yes, these models have been revised down like crazy, and it has nothing to do with the extreme form of social media in terms of the projected deaths. I'm just saying, stop shifting the goalposts, and I'm not going to allow y'all to do that. That was not the point of flattening the curve. The thing that matters here is whether or not their hospitals are being overwhelmed right now. And right now, that's not the case. Yet you have instances like in America, which again, is not directly transferable because America's massive. And even within our country, you have completely different setups and more so completely different experiences. I live in Texas. We are more populated, and we have significantly less amount of deaths than New York, because most of their deaths are coming from out of New York City. But if you're going to try to do this, compare effectiveness of lockdown, when it comes to the point of the lockdown was to not overwhelm. It had nothing to do with stopping the spread altogether. It was spreading the spread out over time. It had nothing to do with stopping it or eradicating the sickness or the virus in its entirety. That's a goalpost move. Now all of a sudden, people are talking about this like we just supposed to remain shut down forever. Well, you can infect the wait. That was always assumed. Y'all assumed that when you were talking flatten the curve and hashtags and whatnot. That was already assumed. Why all of a sudden are we depending on that? The whole idea is that the curve it looks flatter than the MF in a lot of different places. Like I live in a metroplex that's almost as populated as I was talking to this guy from Norway about this. My metroplex has 7 million people in it, so about 2 million more than what about 1.5 million to 2 million more people than Norway. Norway has what, as I checked, 200 deaths, right? Let me look. I'm gonna look again. Norway has 206 deaths. My metroplex, last time I checked, had like 174 or something of that nature. So it's around the same. Actually less, even though having 2 million more people. So we can sit here and try to have this conversation about the effectiveness of the spread. I think that's a different conversation, and I don't know if y'all ready to have that yet, because we have those hot boxes that remained open throughout this whole entire experiment. So how effective was this? I don't know. We'll see soon enough. However, when it comes to Sweden and what we're emphasizing, do not move that post. Don't do it. The whole point was to ensure that the hospital resources were not exhausted, were not utilized, so that even if you had people coming from other diseases or coming from other sicknesses, they could at least be treated and so forth. Right now, man, the curve is flat as I don't know what. Talk about that's the whole reason why I just brought up our metroplex. Flatter than I don't know what. You haven't even hospital workers being furloughed. I talked about this with Lady Ripa's clinic. I'm gonna do a video actually on this. I keep mentioning I haven't done a video about them furloughing their entire staff almost. It's like, look, they tried to get ahead of this, and that makes sense, right? So you push back all the elective procedures, all the preventative care appointments, all of that. You just want to make sure all of your resources are available for these potential patients, and they never came. It never got to the point. That's still what's happening with Sweden right now. Oh, it's coming like a month ago. Then a week passed. Oh man, the next week, man, it's going to be crazy out there. Third week. Well, it's coming. Fourth week. It hasn't happened. Don't y'all do that. I'm not going to allow y'all to just move that post like that. It was never about eradicating the entire virus. That's a completely different goal right there. The point of flatten the curve, it always assumed that the number of infected was going to be the number of infected. It never tried to hide from that. The whole point was that you spread it out over time, so you didn't exhaust those hospital resources, those medical resources, and overwhelm the medical system. That was the entire point, spreading it out over time. So when we look at countries like Sweden and we're going to be like, well, they didn't do this. The thing that matters right now is whether or not their hospital resources are being overwhelmed. As it stands right now, they aren't.